thank you everybody for your patience. We're going to start the final panel session of the event. Personally, for me, this is the best session of the whole summit over the 2 days. As a Ghanaian, I really want to hear the insights. I know how I sound, but I'm from Ghana. And so what I'll do is I'll introduce the panel. First of all, I want to introduce the moderator, Tola Akinyemi. Tola Akinyemi is the head of real estate finance West Africa at Stanbic IBCT Capital. I also want, initially, Tola will start with a presentation. And then based upon the presentation, we'll then forward on to the actual panel itself. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the shift we call the graveyard shift. So I would like to thank everyone that stayed on. It shows that we're interested in the market. We're interested in driving the growth of Ghana as a country and developing also the real estate asset class. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Tola Akiomi, and I manage the West African real estate portfolio for the Standard Bank Group. Many of the parties in this room, we've worked with over time in trying to, create the assets that we see or that have come up within the market. So I'll just quickly speak through what Standard Bank has done, speak to some of the themes that we've seen within the within the market, capital flows, from an aggregation point of view, the depth of capital itself that has come into Ghana as a market, the leading sectors, the key players, where the opportunities are, the changing macro dynamics, demographics that are changing, which then supports the need for increased investment and in trying to develop the real estate asset class. It's been a decade of development, asset creation, economic down cycles leading on to a few stabilization issues, consolidation. But what we're seeing today is aggregation across the space, assets being collated, investors mopping up those acquisition opportunities. And what that leads to is a full maturity of the markets, which then begins to demonstrate value. And you can then begin to see new wave of investments coming through. So that's the key theme. I won't spend more than 10 minutes, and the panel would just have a discussion and touching on various aspects to stimulate what our thoughts are. So I've talked about the Standard Bank Group, and I won't pause further on what Standard Bank has done. I think what is key from this slide is the fact that in supporting real estate investment, we have a broad view. We focus across key sectors that have impact on the macroeconomic stability of countries where we have presence. So across the various asset classes of retail, offices, industrial, residential as well. I've met a few people at the conference, and whereas there are hospitality opportunities, and we've seen Ghana develop so much from an hospitality standpoint, with leading hotel brands coming into that market. But I mean, it's a different financing structure that engenders, and but happy to have a consideration for hospitality assets that are being supported from a group rather than from a single asset view. So you're able to then undertake projects where there is a group that is supporting it, and then you're taking it rather than a single asset with a portfolio view. At the same time, from a product offering point of view, is across vanilla type structures, beyond vanilla type structures. You're talking about corporate finance lend, ECM listings, and various financing options that can then be provided to investors. from what is traditional to also bond, because there's a full the investment banking suite product services that is being offered. And that's something to then begin to stimulate the kind of structures that are underlying and underpinning these assets. In terms of in terms of assets that we've seen, and we're looking at this more from a broad range point of view. There's been a lot of investment that has come in. Assets have been created for 45 within Ghana in itself, and supporting key sponsors, both local and offshore. And I think for growth and stability of our markets, there needs to be an increased level of participation of local players, and the bank takes a stance in providing support solutions to support that, as well as also supporting offshore capital that is invested in the asset classes. This slide just briefly shows, from an aggregation point of view, what we've seen within Sub-Saharan Africa in the last decade. And this shows about 4 billion, and that's both in debt and equity capital. That's a significant number. From our analysis, in terms of flows that have come to Ghana, that comes to about $500 million. That's a significant number. So I was in a forum yesterday. We talked about 54 countries being in Africa. Some people say it's 56, and some other people think it is one. But 54 countries in Africa, if we use that standpoint, if one country can attract $500 million in terms of a percentage of what this figure is, that is greater than 10, 12%, is significant, and what the indices of what tomorrow looks like supports the fact that it would grow. And we'll talk about some of the economic macro statistics that support that political stability, that also supports that drive. Going further, just thinking about, and I'll focus here more on what I talked about when markets have matured. And I think we need to start thinking about that. So not just debt equity financing projects, but how do you create a continuous flow? How do you then have sustainability within the asset class? And I think what provides that support is the secondary market expansion, where you're able to have companies, real estate companies, morph into situations where they can list as companies, attract either bond financing, which is a lower base than possibly traditional bank financing, where they can attract equity capital, where you can consolidate assets and list as a REIT. Is very critical, and in more matured markets, that's what you see. That's how you're able to then raise capital. So I think that is a key thing that needs to happen, and will be a critical part in the next phase of the developments that we will see. This just shows a brief snapshot of various assets, and some might be familiar. Not just in Ghana, there's a bit of West Africa that's focused here, but from the core team, the developments were led by retail. Following the retail was also office developments, the likes of Stanbic Heights, One Airport Square. From a hospitality point of view, key development coming into the market. When we started to visit Ghana, to do work, at that point, one hotel was opening, the Moving Peak. And in the last 5 to 7 years, we've seen an offshoot of the Kempinski brand, the Marriott that's just opened, the Ibis. So you're seeing that prospect, you're seeing that growth channel across. Similarly, across the retail chain, you've seen growth beyond Accra market, and you're beginning to see investors also invest in other secondary cities, Kumasi, Takoradi, for an example. And then, from another standpoint is then, if you then think about the key sectors of office retail, what are the teams driving those? Well, I mean, we've seen rent reversions. So coming from an economic standpoint, where there was demand, and then the supply still started to hit the market. So you have situations where there were rent reversions coming from higher numbers of $40 per square meter to as low as $25 per square meter as well. Vacancy factors all affecting how you structure deals, what sponsors equity. Then you then need to ensure that you have projects that are sustainable. So I think these are key themes. We've seen stability in the market, and with those stability, I think we've come from a situation where products capital was coming in, but there was not a lot of knowledge. But where we are now, I do believe there's sufficient knowledge. There are statistics supporting some of the nuances. If I use an example of running models and having to estimate what the operating cost leakage may be, in the past, you take a Thompson or you use a flat number. There are data supporting that. It's been tested, and you can aggregate that across various assets. So you've seen development of research bodies that have those knowledge and putting it together to then make more informed decisions, which would help create more sustainable assets as we progress forward. And just running quickly, I think I've already talked about this slide, and this just shows from the beginning the market creation. That's the blue bubble. Then a market saturation point, economic down cycles. Some retailers exiting the market, growth of local developers, local players. That is positive, and then increased prospect based on the aggregation that we're beginning to then see. Just focusing on some of the key players that have worked across the various sector classes, and the various sector classes are there. A lot more from an offshore investor or participation point of view. We're beginning to see increased participation, and also from local players that are doing wonderful assets or creating joint venture arrangements with the offshore players. I think it's important because capital is very critical in undertaking projects. So getting the right capital stack, and it could be, and it's all determined and based on the cash flow that you see from the asset. But getting the right capital stack in terms of, if equity quantum, for example, should be, let's say, a figure of 75%, then it's then important. If one entity can't provide that equity capital, to have a joint arrangement working with maybe a landowner and working with an offshore investor to pull funds together and then ensure that what is critical is creating assets that are sustainable. And already touched on this. For me, what is critical is the path forward, and in terms of where we're going to, the structures that are shaping how our markets are evolving is key to creating assets that will stand the test of time, that will be sustainable, that will create employment opportunities, that would engender or create the returns that investors are then looking for. And I think we'll then this is a disclaimer. You don't need to focus on that part. So I will call on the panelists, and we can then simulate other questions from there on.
Cool, he'll turn it off. Thank you, Tola. So we're now going to call on the panelists to have a high-level, in-depth conversation surrounding the Ghana real estate market. We're going to look into mixed-use developments with some components composing of commercial, industrial, residential. First of all, I just want to call up the CEO of Apollonia City, Bright Owusu, who is here. I'll also like to call up the managing director of the Volta River Authority, PropCo, which is Mr. William Bobe. I would like to call up the founder and CEO of Beaufort Properties, Mr. Ernest Hansen. And I would also like to call up the managing director of Gold Key Properties, Fuzina Abu, if she could please join us. So Tola will moderate the session. Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, fellow panelists. Thank you for making the time and commitment to represent our home, which is called Ghana. So I'll just give a little bit of time to, a few seconds to introduce yourselves and your businesses to the audience. I'll start with you, and Fusena can go.
Okay, I'm Fusaina Abu. I'm the MD of Gold Key Properties, a commercial and residential real estate developer in Accra.
Good afternoon. My name is Ernest Hansen. I'm the director for Beaufort Properties. We've done about 7 residential developments to date, and it's our core business.
My name is Bright Osamofa, CEO of Apollonia City. Apollonia City is part of the Rendever Group. It's a approximately 2,400 acre development just on the outskirts of Accra. It's mixed use, and so encompasses various real estate assets. We're doing a bit of residential. We've just launched our light industrial component. We've done some transactions in the social space, and we're looking to do the first commercial development hopefully before the end of the year.
I'm William Bobby. I'm the managing director of VRA Propco. I think for those of you who know, VRA is the largest energy producing company in Ghana. I think like Eskom in SA. What we're trying to do with Propco is to take the VRA's real estate assets and convert it into a commercial real estate portfolio. It's an extremely difficult task, but we're at it, and we are hoping that we can turn something around. So our first project, for those who know the airport, Patrice Lumumba Road, we've done the Volta Place, and we have other projects in the pipeline that we're looking at.
All right, thank you very much. I think I'll just kick off, starting with some of the theme of what I presented just a short while ago, just looking at some of the stability or price stability issues that we saw in the market with rent reversions that had come, about 2-3 years ago. So coming from a base of on the supply of assets, quality assets, and then coming to a situation where there was a bit of some supply demand dynamics and what that really means. So I think for Fusena, given what you're doing within Goki, focused on commercial real estate offices. I know you do a bit of residential as well. But I mean, from your perspective, given supply dynamics within the retail and office market, from your perspective, what are you doing to then attract and retain tenants in the current market? Because tenant cash flows is key to the sustainability of the assets valuation and ensuring that economic returns are then sustainable. So how are you able to do that? And what would you say is the key thing that people should look out for?
So you're absolutely right. Retaining tenants is critical to everything that we do. And right now, it's a challenging market. It's a tenants market in many ways. So to retain tenants, to attract the grade A corporate tenants that we want, we really have to be at the top of our game. So this means, not just being able to provide the best possible commercial proposal for our tenants. It also means making sure that from a quality point of view, that we're peerless on the market. So the type of things which tenants are looking for when they approach us are actually not just rent related. Increasingly, there's a real focus on the well-being of staff, and so that means that Property management is absolutely key. So for us, we do all of our property management in-house because it allows us to maintain certain standards that we wouldn't necessarily be able to insist upon if we outsourced our property management. So for retaining key tenants, providing those services, the added extras that they might not necessarily get elsewhere, generous parking allocations, those are the things which increasingly tenants don't cut corners on, and in this market they can insist upon. Yeah, so it's really, it is a competitive market, but what I would say is that for those landlords that have a focus on quality and are delivering genuine grade A buildings, there is a market out there, and it's a market that is focused on the product as opposed to just on price.
I think the follow-on I would ask on that bit is to say, from your perspective, do you think that we've gotten into a regime where rental prices are stabilized? Because I mean, from recent interactions, there's the sense that rent reversions are still happening, but given the assets you've created, and I know you've done quite a bit in the last 2 years, are you seeing a pressure on prices, rental prices?
So I would say that there is a fair amount of stability in the rental pricing market at the moment, and that's because there's a lot of information available. So everybody knows what their competitors are pricing at. And that information is quite often publicly available. So there's, I'd say, a shared understanding of what grade A rents in different areas of Accra should be. So from that perspective, it's increasingly transparent within $1 or $2 what a fair rent is. And in the last year or so, it's held pretty firm.
And would that be the case for, so I mean, beyond tiering of the different types of assets, grade A, grade B, would that also be the case for locations? So comparing an airport city development to a ridge or to a cantonment city. So do you find a disparity in terms of prices?
I'd say that in Accra, what's most important is the accommodation grade A. And is it genuine grade A of an international standard? If it is, the price disparity between locations is not necessarily so much because the center of Accra is fairly accessible. So the advantages of being in ridge as opposed to in cantonments, yes, each location has its pros and cons, but I think that from a client-tenant perspective, it's not necessarily the key decision maker. The actual product, what they're getting, is what makes them decide whether they go to ridge or whether they come to cantonments.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think, William, you also exposed within the commercial offices class. I would like to get your own perspective then as well in terms of where you see, firstly, whether you agree with Fosun in terms of, where are rents going to now? Are we in a stabilization period, one? And also on the back of that, where you see the prospects, in terms of what is the attraction to drive the new growth or new asset development activities?
Yeah, I think for some of us, I sit as the MD Propco, but I also have my fingers in so many pies because I've always been a consultant. So I work in a sector where I deal with a lot of occupiers, understand what they want, and also appreciate the businesses and the turnover that they're doing. The pricing that we currently have, which I think Growth Point mentioned today in their presentation at the moment, when we even started from Lagos at $100 per square meter, and then you come to Accra. The truth of the matter is that when you speak to a lot of occupiers, they can't afford those rates. And then for me, it's not just about the headline rent that you're looking at, but you're looking at the lease itself that is being signed, because there are certain costs in the lease as well, which if you don't read the document very well, you sign up to it and you realize that your cost is not the $40 you're paying, but slightly more than that. We did a Volta place completed in June 2018, and by the end of the year, we're almost about 100% occupied. It's just about the way we approach and the way we deal with the tenants. I think the pricing, which got to around 40, 45, is not sustainable. Where I think the market is, and when you speak to some of the real occupiers, and just this afternoon I was speaking to a potential occupier, I think the rent sits around the region of about 20 to 25 for grade A. If you are able to produce the right thing, the right location at this rent level, you can fill the space in no time. And we're seeing this, and I believe in it. I talk to a lot of occupiers, and if we can produce a building, good quality at that level between 2025. What we need to work on is our cost of construction, and I believe we can bring that down.
So when you say cost, I think that's an interesting, and I have a different view about where those price rentals are. 2025, I think that might knock certain assets off their perch. But, I think an interesting thing also is, how do you drive costs lower, and what would you? I think that goes to one of the points that I think we discussed earlier. In that, going forward, what are you going to be seeing? Big size or larger size or smaller size projects? So and that cuts across all asset classes, be it retail, offices, industrials. Because that goes to what you can then. If your costs are lower, or you're able to drive some economics to drive costs lower, then that you could benchmark that to where the market is comfortable in terms of a price point. So how do you see that developing?
Yeah, I think we need to give the market the right product. So when you mention something like large projects, small projects, if you take the retail sector for us, we've all seen and we've all heard a commentary about like the West Hills Mall and its performance and that sort of thing. And then I've always believed in neighborhood retail malls. And I've said, because of the infrastructure provision that we have in Ghana at the moment, we can't start doing things that happen in the matured markets. When I lived in the UK, for instance, and you want to move out and go to Blue Water and that sort of thing, they were built on the edges of the city with good infrastructure where you can get out on the day on the road and get to the mall very easily. But in Ghana, we don't have that. You see, so when you start building this type of malls at the edges of towns, large scale, you see, you're not going to get a middle class to drive through certain traffic to get there. I think if we start looking at the neighborhood retail malls, and for some of us who've seen the ANC mall, for instance, in East Legon, we believe it works. Those are the ones that are close to the middle class, are close to our neighborhoods. People can easily access it and buy their groceries and do. And I think if you look at our lifestyles as well, we're all very busy. So coming back from work in the evening, you're not going to drive to West Hills Mall to do your grocery, but you want an accessible mall that you can do your sort of convenience retail and get back home. So perhaps we are not there yet with these sort of very large sort of scale developments. Even if you look at the office sector, for those of you who know where the demand is coming from, very few large demand, like 8,000 square meters or 5,000 square meters do we see in the market. So where we see the demand is like very small occupiers, like what we see, we did at Volta Place, for instance. Between 200 to 400 square meters, you're shifting very quickly. But if you're going to build a 20,000 square meter office block in Accra, where is the demand going to come from?
So I think from my perspective, I think that would also then be driven by, who are the key offtakes that you then see? Is it driven by multinationals, which would need larger floor plates, or then indigenous companies that might, the sweet spot for them would be sizes of about 250 square meter. So I think it's a mix of both, and one then needs to shape. So you can build speculatively. You need to then have a situation where there's already a clear sense of what your offtake is, at least for 50%, and then that begins to shape what the product that will be developed will be.
Yeah, but if you look at the Accra market, what we've seen is that for the large tickets in the market, if you take MTN for instance, and some of the very big tickets, they have the ability to come together and build themselves. So they look at the cost of renting and they look at the cost of building on their own. So you'd find that they sort of tend to do their own thing. But to get a large occupier who would come to you and say, I'm taking 10,000 square meters. Look, I've been in the market for the last 10 years. I'm yet to see that requirement in the market. The banks, the telcos, government, these are the key areas where they can take larger space. But sometimes they have the ability to build on their own, and they are also very price sensitive.
Okay, thank you very much. Because the panelist is composed of parties across various asset classes. This morphs a bit to the commercial real estate space of office and retail. So we'll just flip it slightly to give Bright and Nennet some opportunity to delve into sectors that are also very critical to how our markets evolve. So I think I'll start with Bright. The Apollonia City, we're having a chat earlier on today. I was privileged to go visit it earlier this year. And I think what comes out from there is, it's noble what Renewal has tried to do in a couple of cities. And we're talking recently about how, on a comparative basis and with the Lagos project commencing only recently, has been able to move more quickly. So from my perspective, then what role can transportation infrastructure play in establishing and creating new cities for the future? But I think what we're talking about now is not so much about now, but what the future holds and how we begin to plan, what steps we begin to take, what engagements we have with government to ensure that the right framework is set to create the new cities for tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks, Tola. I think transportation definitely plays much or a big role in real estate and in creating sustainable cities, as you're talking about. Accra is not an exception. I think if you look across Lagos and almost every African city, we're all used to the rush hour, morning traffic and the same rush hour evening traffic. Across board, I think on the average, people spend 4 hours of their productive time, sitting in traffic and commuting to their workplaces. This obviously has, it correlates directly with affordability and pricing. And also, part of our research shows that, a lot of people spend up to sometimes 30% of their income, in transport. And so certainly, this is something that is key. One example, in our case, because we recognize that is something that Apollonia City needed a very long time ago. And so, many years we tried to do a lot of, lobbying. This is not something that private developers such as ours can invest our capital in. We are investing a lot in core infrastructure within our development, but, we also need government to help, the private sector by bringing some of these much needed infrastructure. So I'm happy to report that, the main road connecting Accra City, mainly from the Adenta roundabout to Dodoa, and in a large extent to our development, went into the budget this year. and is said to be, there are plans to expand that. But more importantly, I think something I just want to share with the panel and the members here as well is, I've always said that one of the things we lack in, I can only speak for Accra, but again, it cuts across a lot of markets, is skill. So you find a situation where a lot of local developers, small developers, if I may put it that way, everybody looks for land, on the outskirts, and we all expect government to bring the infrastructure. Government, as we know, will never have the budget. There's always so much pressure on everything else. So clustering, I think that's something that is very important. One of the things that we've tried to use our platform to do is to attract a lot of developers, onto our site, such that if we all, basically come together and go and lobby government, it's easier for government to bring that much needed infrastructure, to that site. The other solution is also mixed-use development, which is terminology that is bandied about a lot these days. We all know that we need to decentralize our centers. And so what that means is we need to start creating, various real estate asset classes to co-locate. You need to have a bit of industrial, commercial, and over time, the idea is to create a live, work, and play environment. So these are one of the solutions to addressing some of these infrastructure and transportation challenges.
Okay, thanks for that. Just a quick follow on the comment that you raised there. So in terms of the Apollonia City, what would you say is the key driver to locating it in where it is, and what you expect will be a catalyst to really drive the uptake?
Yeah, I think you and I were discussing this earlier today. The key, we did a lot of research before the land was acquired. I think if you come into Accra today, you will struggle to find, any contiguous piece of land of about 2,000 acres that is close to the city, or it's closer to the city than ours. So our model obviously relies a lot on scale. So that informed, the decision in picking that particular location. In addition to that, it's quite central. It's within the growth node of Accra, the natural growth node of Accra, and they're very good. When I say very good access, on the map, it's about 22 kilometers from Tema, fully tarred. But then we still, I still think there's some level of improvement, that is required, infrastructure-wise, to really open up and catalyze the site. We're basically catalyzing the development ourselves. The road will definitely help. As I said, that has gone into the budget. I've been involved in a number of meetings with the Railway Ministry and urban roads as well, in terms of, because our development is essentially a structure plan. We always try to make sure that whatever infrastructure, the long-term plans of government factors our development into that. And so, again, there are a lot of plans, to build, for instance, a ring road, to the north of Accra that basically connects the east to the west. That's in the offering. That has, again, we've inputted into that. So if that materializes in future, that is definitely going to be beneficial to the project. There is Inner City Rail Master Plan, again, which incorporates our project as part of the lobbying that we did, again, to make sure that government factors the location of our development and, the potential growth into all of their plans. But, that said, we obviously cannot sit down and wait for government to do all of these. So we're catalyzing these things ourselves gradually. It's taking a bit longer than ideally should, but I think it's one of those things that I think we're going to start to see an exponential growth at some point. So we've, as much as possible, tried to focus on developing all the real estate asset classes in tandem. Do a bit of residential, sign a few industrial transactions, work on commercial. There are schools that are already up and running. All of these things coming together sort of catalyzes, the development in itself. We have to create the destination for people to come.
So maybe in a few years' time, it could be a nominee for the best mixed use development with all what you've said?
I think we're actually nominating even
All right.
today. So I think
Okay.
many years time we're probably going to scoop the award and continue to win
All
for a very
right.
long
We
time.
look forward to that. So, and that's why we're speaking around the residential thing. But I think and you should be able to speak around that. Affordability has been an issue, and we talk about price point in terms of rental. There's also that discussion when it comes to um, housing. That what is the price point that creates effective demand, you know, and even having created that, you know, a mortgage product versus a rent loan, which is also some of the key alternatives being preferred. So from that point of view, I mean, how do you think you can drive for full home ownership? How is that um, promoted such that to the extent you can create effective demand, you can then see developers both offshore and local creating such assets and creating that market?
Okay, thank you. Just to hit at that point about is Ghana the next real estate investment destination, I just would like to say we've had it too good. We've had it so good for so long, and I think now we're having to sweat a little bit, and that's the kind of cycle we're in right now. 10 years ago, just anecdotally, I have a client of mine who was getting $4,500 for his two-bed apartment. Now he's getting 2.8, which is still good, but for him, it's just he's priced his mind is always been 4.5, and so I think there's adjustment that we're all going through, and it requires you to be a bit more cerebral and think. Like I said, we used to have 2 years up front 10 years ago for rent. Now people are used to 6 months, and landlords are having to adjust their thinking. So just to go back to where Ghana is right now, on the cost side, it's a macro issue that you almost get sick and tired of people saying, why are developers' profits so high? Why don't you reduce? Why don't you affordable housing? But the reality is, 80% of our inputs are imported, and if it costs $1 in South Africa, we're going to have to do 50% import duty VAT, and let alone the risk. If you've got tiles, you have to have factor in breakages. You have to also the working capital. If I live in South Africa, I can order tiles a week. Next week, please bring me this X amount of tiles. We're having to do 3 months lead time and also pay up front. So the working capital financing is different. So the cost of building is expensive, period. Labor is cheap, but is a small percentage of your total construction costs. So affordable housing and building affordably can only be done with government assistance. It's not about reducing your margin. There's always political pressure to say, oh, cut your price of your units. It just doesn't work like that. We react to market forces. So on that note, I think it's just affordable. To get that price point right, we need the land issue sorted out. We need the cost of import duties also sorted out. And then we can talk about properly building affordable housing. So that's number one. But in a market where 80% of my buyers are buying cash and not using mortgages, it sounds sweet, but it limits the size of my market. If I had my buyers could get access to debt at 30% LBT, my market triples. Instead of buying 200,000 cash, they'll buy 600,000. And the market is just not there yet. So as I said, the last few years, we've had to really think about financial engineering. How do you get people to buy? And like you said, there's different models that we need to look at. It's a human right to have a decent house, but everywhere in the world, no one has 100% home ownership. All right, it's usually around 60% in Europe. So can we look at different models like rent to own, shared ownership, and apply it to the African context? By this, I mean the pension funds should be able to own assets and act as landlords, give people affordable housing, and to have rent structures where people are not paying 2 years rent up front and they can pay quarterly. So that is where the market needs to go. So there's definitely opportunities in Ghana, but we just need to reassess and realize that it's tough out there, and you need to just get your brain going on how best to hit effective demand. So.
Thank you very much for that. I think you touched on incentives that government can give, and I think it cuts across various aspects. And I think I'll just follow on with Fusena in that regard. So you mentioned it as well in terms of government incentive, tax, I don't pass through rates. So, what are the critical constraints that you would be expecting to see from the government? And I think it's useful to share with the audience how is the government supporting the real estate asset class. I'll give an example, and I think understanding it in terms of what the real estate sector means for the GDP. In Nigeria, we in any key market, in more established markets, you have real estate as a component of the GDP about 20%. That's significant. So, because it drives businesses and it drives growth and contributes to the overall economy. So, what will be in your mind? What is happening? What do you expect to happen to stimulate more investments and growth within that asset class from the government?
So I would say that there are definitely regulatory changes that we would like to see that would stimulate growth in real estate. If we start with taxes, for example, we have withholding tax, which significantly affects developers' cash flow, and in many ways can contribute to reducing the overall pricing of an asset. And it's not a tax which developers in other parts of the world, certainly not in Europe and the West, have to contend with. But I'd say that there's also other ways where changes could be made to the tax system to make things a bit more friendly for developers. For example, typically all large developments are done in SPVs. So a single developer may have 10 different special purpose vehicles, but be unable to offset profits in one vehicle against losses in another. So I think I would say in Ghana, it would be great to see group relief in practice so that developers can operate a more holistic approach to their portfolio rather than having to manage the tax prospects of each individual asset individually. So definitely there are things that could be done on the tax fronts that would make life a little bit easier. Furthermore, I'd also add to that the way in which we approach VAT in Ghana. So there's a 6-month limit on offsetting your inflows and your outflows. Now, our financial year is 1 year, so it becomes very difficult to maximize your tax position if you're dealing in 6-monthly cycles. So, that's just tax regulation. If we move on to, say, local authorities, building permits, habitation certificates, it would be great to have a lot more transparency so that we know if we're applying for a building permit today, that's going to take 4 weeks. And rather than we're applying for a building permit today, we don't know how long it's going to take. So, transparency of regulation from local authorities would allow us to plan and manage the expectations of our tenants, potential anchor tenants, a lot better.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything else to that. William, Bright, anyone?
Yeah, I just want to add to the submissions my colleagues have made on affordability. I think Ernest touched on a number of the factors, but I still think financing is critical. It's one thing that we need to potentially look at. I don't have a solution to that. I'm talking about mortgage financing in terms of the interest. I don't have the solution to this in terms of, to be honest with you. But in terms of interest rates, they're really high. And then as Ernest said, because the majority of our buyers are cash buyers, we have a situation where if you're a developer, you're not necessarily, incentivized to finish a unit. Ideally, you want to match the delivery to the payment plans, because payment plans is what people want. And the longer, you go to the construction cycle, the more expensive it is. As I said, the majority of the components, are imported. You've got a myriad of litigation, and land issues, which you've got to factor all that pricing, and you're paying, lawyers a lot of money, to litigate, which stalls and delays projects. And then you've also got bulk infrastructure, right? So whereas in Europe and even in South Africa, many developed markets, government brings the bulk infrastructure to your doorstep. Developers, no matter how small you are, and the majority of the developers we have tend to be smaller scale developers. They do a 10-acre development, move on to do another 10 and 5. But you're having to price in your bulk infrastructure in addition to the infrastructure on the side itself. So, I mean, these are all factors that contribute to, the cost. Like I said, there's always a lot of pressure on developers to reduce pricing, but there's very, little we can do about that until we start to see, a sea change in some of these factors.
All right, thank you, Bright. I think we're running out of time, so I think before I think we'd like to take any questions from the audience. We've got experts that are seasoned, that understand the Ghana market. So if there are any questions, if you can just pass it on to the MCs. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think in trying to round up, in questions, either you can pass papers and we can take it. But while that is going on, I'll like just 2 minutes from your respective buckets. What final words would you want the audience to take home? In terms of the market, the sectors in which you play in, and what the positive outlook can be for next year and for the future. So I'll start with William and we can take it down.
Yeah, I think some of the areas were in the previous sessions that we listened to, particularly the area I like is the industrial sector. I think Ghana is growing very rapidly. 10 years ago, when we sat here and were talking, I quite remember doing a presentation. I looked at my old slides and said the population of Ghana was about 24 million. Now we're about 30.5 million, with our urbanization centers increasing very rapidly. We are seeing a change in the way we do our retailing as well. And I believe that if you're looking at an area to invest, because I think the office sector, retail sector is a little bit overpriced. We think that the valuations are a bit too high, as some of our investors are saying, but the industrial has been overlooked over some time. So the distribution center to feed the retail market and also the industrial sector is an area that one can look at. Also, I think the hotel leisure area has been neglected by the internationals, managing companies. Currently, it's being operated by private individuals within that sector. And I believe that if the internationals could come into that sector as well, maybe there's huge opportunities there for the leisure component. Because when our kids vacate from school, we're all stuck at home. The only place we can take them is to walk around the shopping malls and the hotels. There's not many leisure play that we can do it. So I believe that that's a sector which doesn't look very attractive from a banking point of view when you're lending. But I think that's a sector that, and then the last one I still believe in is the neighborhood retail malls. Until our infrastructure is sorted out so we can drive easily to access different places, I think the neighborhood retail malls is one of the areas that one can look at now.
Yeah, so just to summarize, is Ghana back as a leading Africa, real estate investment destination? I think the answer for me is yes. We've just gone through a bit of a difficult cycle, as most of the markets that investors here, will be used to. But I believe we've always said that Africa is not a continent. There are over 52 different countries. You need to understand the local context and try to structure your transactions to mitigate, any sort of perceived risk. I think the market will definitely recover, as William said. Clearly in the commercial and retail space, when I say retail, I mean the regional sort of massive malls, there's a bit of an oversupply in the market. So I see it more as the rents that will start to correct themselves and come down. I'm usually very passionate about residential and affordable housing. Not necessarily because it's a focal part of what we are doing, but I think that's where we see real demand in terms of the locals. We all know there's been we keep saying the deficit of about 1.7 to 2 million for the last 10 years. That's what I keep hearing. And so that is real demand, and developers such as us should be, creative enough to be able to come up with products that will meet that particular demand. One example, and one of the things that we are pushing and lobbying for is, for instance, we want a place like Apollonia City to become a special economic zone for affordable housing. And what I mean by, I've talked about, the pressure on government to take infrastructure to every developer. If we can attract all developers into an area where the government is only spending once to bring that infrastructure to site, it then makes it easier to want to monitor because they're in one area. And then we're pushing things like incentives you give to developers to be able to, provide products within that sector. For instance, I think it's been tried in some markets. So for instance, if you ask, say, developers, you must come up with products priced between 50 to 60,000. You must develop to a minimum of 200 units a year, and that then qualifies you to X amount of tax rebates or, certain waivers on import taxes and what have you. I believe that is the sort of thing that, if we take to government, it makes it easier as opposed to everybody trying to go for, waivers or trying to get government to bring infrastructure to their side. So it definitely looks positive. I think the market is rebounding. I completely agree with William on the neighborhood malls. I think that is the way to go. And so, I think I'll hand over to my colleague from here.
Thank you, Bright.
Was it me? Yeah. I think for me the answer is we should be a leading real estate destination because we have everything. We are the gateway to West Africa. A lot of people expect to establish in Ghana and then branch out to look for business opportunities elsewhere. A lot of Francophone countries like to come to Ghana to learn English. It's an easier place to learn English. Sorry, man. So we could be genuinely a cosmopolitan West African city, just like Nairobi is. And you feel that when you're in Accra versus other African cities. So that to me is the opportunity. However, the issue with Ghana is the mismatch and the inefficiencies. So everyone says, oh, the real estate market is saturated. One brush painted over the market. But if you delve inside, what you find is that you're getting 50% occupancy in the 3 beds because they compete with townhouses because there's no oversupply of 3 beds. But if you look closely at the studios and 1 beds, there's a lack of supply, and they're doing 90%, 80%. So the market is really mismatched, and you have to have the local nous, the word that someone used earlier. It's not, you can't paint it with the same brush. And on the inefficiencies, again, just to touch, commercial is not my space, but regulation. So in Rwanda, you can't just establish an office in a residential area. Now, another way to boost office supply could be just have proper regulation where you can't say companies, you can't just go to airport and have a house and turn it into an office. And there's I drive around in Anda, parts of South Africa, you don't see office buildings in a residential community. So there's a way to boost up even the existing demand, all right, despite everything else as it is right now. So there's a lot of inefficiencies and ways to tweak the current system to really boost the market. And like I said, if you get the right financing and mortgage market in place, the market will boost very quickly. So Ghana is tough, but the opportunities are there. So you just have to take the shots. Thanks.
In summary, I'd say that the outlook, certainly from a Gold Key perspective, is definitely positive. The corporate tenants are out there, yes. Competition is tough, but if you are providing high quality product, you will win those tenants. And to add to that, the development that gives us a lot of optimism is the influx of foreign capital. I'd say that increasingly private equity from outside of Ghana, be that Africa or further afield, is very interested in investing in Ghana. So if you are a fund manager with an amount to invest in London, and you're going to get 3% return on your investment, you're certainly going to look at investing in a stable West African country where you're going to get 10%, and potentially upwards return on your investment. So I think that's going to be the next big wave to push development in Accra. More and more as people realize that the difference between the perceived risk associated with Africa and the actual risk is maybe a lot less than they might at first think.
Thank you very much, panelists. If there are no more questions, I think is to say thank you for taking the time to wait for this last panel. We hope we've been able to share some insights about the Ghana market. Please feel free to catch up with any of the panelists or myself during the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.